All right, welcome back again, fellas, to the draft recap version of the Blind Pig. Without getting into too much detail, we can run around the horn a little bit. John, what's one thing you liked or did not like about our particular draft?
Yeah, so I obviously loved that we took a linebacker at 19, and I specifically loved that I got lucky, and the guy that we drafted in our mock, Jamin Davis, was the guy that we took. So that was kind of fun. Of course, nobody else that I mentioned that we mentioned got drafted, but we were pretty close on at least on some of the positions in need. I really love the Cosme pick.
Yes.
Some people were upset about Darisaw being there and us not taking him, but I think it kind of bore out like I predicted it would, that there were so many tackles in the draft that they felt more comfortable waiting on the tackles with the depth that was there. So we got two great starters at positions in need. And I actually didn't mind them taking a long snapper. I saw a lot of people getting themselves worked up about that in the 6th round, but we really needed a long snapper, and you got to find someone somewhere. And the way I look at it is, hey, how often is a 6th rounder an immediate starter? So we fill that need. So I don't really have a problem with it. But I know some people thought it was kind of that we could have gotten someone as an undrafted free agent, I suppose. I felt like we didn't need a wide receiver and a cornerback so much. And not only did we take both of those, but we actually took 2 wide receivers. So that's kind of got us in a position, not necessarily a bad position, but somebody's not going to make the cut that we thought was going to make the cut at wide receiver. So I felt like that was a little bit of a stretch. And then the last thing I'll say just in general is I wasn't really sure about the cornerback pick, because at that time there was linebackers that I liked, there were tight ends that I liked, and there were offensive linemen that I liked still there. So I didn't really go into the draft thinking we needed a cornerback desperately, at least. But again, if he's a good cornerback, I guess you can't ever have enough of those. So.
You're talking about St. Just, right?
Yes.
But go ahead and elaborate, Mark. What was your feel?
Overall, I've been thinking about it as a whole. The most refreshing thing to me about all of this has been that we conducted a professional, researched, defensible draft where you can understand every pick. Might disagree with some of them or think that we might have done better, but this looked like a professional outfit to me, running a draft that checked the boxes, didn't reach for anybody, that at least that I can see, didn't get tempted to move up and try to grab the quarterback during all the excitement and mania of a draft. Davis, I know we're going to go through all the guys in more detail, but just what I was thinking about with St. Just is it was a surprise to me, particularly since it's a guy that in my research had not exactly run across him too much. But this is a guy they clearly have a plan for, and you can sort of understand it, right? He's got all the physical skills, and they clearly have some packages in mind that he can help them with. So my whole feeling on the draft, and I could quibble with our friend Dax Milne on the last pick of the day. I'm really having a hard time seeing how this guy makes the team, even as a depth kind of guy. But in your 3rd pick of the 7th round, I'm not going to quibble over that. So that was a long way around to saying I think they had a hell of a draft, in that it wasn't splashy. They didn't try to outdo themselves. They were professional, and I think they helped the team, and we head into the year a more solid, rounded team than we went into the draft.
Paul?
For me, I was thoroughly impressed with our entire draft, top to bottom. And as I watched the draft this year, there was one thing that constantly came to mind to me, and that was a famous quote by our beloved Joe Gibbs. And that's, you don't win with the X's and O's, you win with people. And in reading up on these guys and on a lot of these players, they all seem to be outstanding individuals, not just good, talented football players. there seems to be an emphasis now with our coaching staff on the whole person, not just the skill set. And the whole person helps to create a winning culture. And I think that's way overdue in Washington in my mind, and a very big reason as to why I'm satisfied with the draft. I mean, every team at the end of the day can feel that at the end of the 3 days, they're a lot more talented than they were prior to the draft. There's not one team out there that doesn't feel good about themselves going into the summer. But like I said, what often separates the championship teams from the rest of the pack is the attitudes, the selflessness, the work ethic, the competitiveness, the passion for the game. And there seems to be a huge emphasis on bringing in those kinds of players. And I think ultimately that those kinds of players help drive the success of a franchise. But that's also the thing that helps you as a fan be proud of the guys that they're putting out on the field every week in burgundy and gold. And I just love the fact that, you know, there's guys now that I can cheer for, but also feel good about. So I love our draft top to bottom.
Well said.
I won't go too deep, but I will say I am not as bullish on the draft. But I guess what I should say is this was a very unsexy but effective draft. There were not a lot of picks that you looked at, and outside of maybe De'Ami Brown that just kind of blew your skirt up. And that was just because he was later. But then there were equally a number of picks that you look at and say, okay, well, he's going to fit. All right, well, that guy's going to fit. That guy's going to fit. And all the way down to Dax Milne, outside of him, you can look at this entire team and say, those guys are pretty much all going to make the roster. And if you can say that about any draft, you're probably doing something right. I will say I was a little frustrated at 19 because we took Davis and Darisaw was on the board. I was a little frustrated at 2 because we took Cosme when I thought we were going to go maybe a different direction. I got really frustrated when I saw the freaking Cowboys get Jabril Cox, Micah Parsons, and Simi Fehoko. But that's my own personal thing, so I won't go too deep into that. But to take it a step further, what we can do is probably dig into these guys a little bit deeper. I'll go ahead and launch the highlight video on Jim Davis. I know, John, you looked into him quite a bit while we were taking on this.
Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time on him. I just think he was, again, kind of back to your comment about that we didn't always go for the sexy pick. I know a lot of people thought, even setting aside what we didn't know apparently about JOK, I think a lot of people thought we were going to go for the sexy pick, which would have been him at that point. But I think Davis is just a really well-rounded linebacker who's a great athlete. He plays with a lot of aggression and has great speed, and he's still got some ceiling. He's still got some upside because he has only been starting at that position. He only played the 1 year at Kentucky, so I think that's the most exciting thing about it is he's a super solid guy. He's not a cowboy, no pun intended. He's going to do what the coaches ask him to do. But he's still got a lot of growth that he could have at that position with some really good coaching. So I was psyched about him, and I was glad to see he was still there.
Mark, Paul, anything to add?
I personally like the fact that, you know, I know it's a first round pick, but you're bringing in a day one starter. And, you know, that's the type of player you need in round one. And there's no question about it that Davis is a day one starter. When I think of him, I can't help but think back to that playoff game against Tampa Bay. And that playoff game really was a reminder to us that our defense is not quite where it needs to be to win a championship yet. You know, Tampa Bay was getting rid of the ball quite quickly, using their backs, using their tight ends a lot. I think Cameron Brate had 80 yards in that game. Leonard Fournette averaged 9.3 yards per reception that game. Davis is going to be the type of player that, because he's so solid in coverage, he's going to, you know, make teams think twice of probably using that Tampa Bay strategy, which was to get rid of the ball quickly, and it'll allow our defensive line to hopefully feast. So I'm really, really happy about him being brought in, and you know, the overall impact that he can have on our defense.
And to piggyback on that, Paul, I was remembering the Philadelphia game and had had they not pulled Jalen Hurts in that game, he probably would have continued to run unmolested through the middle of our back seven. We haven't had a guy in the middle who can run and tackle at that position in quite a while. And I think this is a perfect fit there. I was listening to Rivera talk about Davis and the things that he mentioned, and we keep coming back to this with this team, the whole idea of being flexible. He used the expression position flex when he talked about Davis, that he can cover backs, he's going to cover tight ends, he will be able to rush the passer on occasion, and he also said in quotes, he can run. So I envision them having him filling that massive hole we've had in the middle of our defense as long as I can remember. Teams have been beating us with, remember Eli Manning running for a first down to beat us because there was nobody in the middle of the field. I'm tired of that. So my bottom line on this guy is if like you have to say this to any player coming in, if his work ethic is as good as it looks like it is, if his football smarts can marry up with good NFL coaching, the sky's the limit on this kid.
So I just wanted to throw one other comment in there about Davis. He's different from some of the other guys we selected in that most of the other draft picks had big resumes as far as their college years. Like we went for a lot of guys that played 3-4 seasons of football at their position. And so I think they really must have been impressed with him to draft him, even though he just had the 1 year as a starter at Kentucky. I think that speaks to how impressed they were with what they were seeing on the film from him.
It's hard to see a downside on this one. Talk to me, Derek. What do you think about him?
Well, the biggest thing that it tells me is that Rivera and Del Rio handpicked their guy and they got their guy. All you heard was that they kept saying that he was the top defensive player on their board. He was the guy that made the most sense. JOK was on the board and they passed on him. And so did everybody else in the NFL, all the way beyond our 51st pick, if I'm not mistaken. So we could have even hypothetically had him in the second. This was their guy. I was starting to loosen up on JOK coming into the draft because of his size. He's a tweener guy. I think he's a little bit more explosive. Landon Collins, that's not a knock. Landon Collins is very good at what he does, but you start to wonder what's going to happen to JOK when that guard pulls and you have a 300-pound guard coming down on him. You know what I mean? He didn't see that much. He was free to roam. Well, Brandon Sheriff can run a lot better than most of the guards he was playing against. So in the NFL, that's a different animal. So I like it. I like the pick. I, again, was let down because we had Darisaw waiting for us, but this is definitely not a bad pick. I'm not sitting here and saying we failed because I'm perfectly content and happy with the pick. But so I have a little bias to it, but that's just me being a curmudgeon.
Well, no,
So
that's fair. That's fair, though. It's a fair observation. I do think he's going to have to get stronger. He's kind of lean. I think he's 234. He doesn't look it, but I think he packs on 10 or 15 pounds over the next 2 years of NFL muscle and fits into stopping the run game a little better. And
the most important thing I heard about him is he played all three positions. And I know that might not seem like it's the most important, but especially in our defense and in our team scheme, you can see it. Multiple guys wearing multiple hats.
Position
One play
flex. Position flex.
He can line up at the mic, then you can shift him out. He can play coverage on the weak side. If you're playing Ertz, he can then kind of flip around and play strong side and blitz. He can do a lot of things. You can move Holcomb. You can move Bostic. You can set it up so that you have the best matchup within the matchup. So without further ado, I think we can jump on to old Sammy Cosmi, who we pick in the second round. Is that right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Cosmi? Yeah. I don't know if it's
Cosmi?
A soft S or a Z, but we'll go with Cosmi until we hear different.
Right. Who wants to take the lead on this guy?
Well, I'll chirp up. So in our mock draft, I talked myself out of Cosmi among some other guys because I've listened too much to the NFL analysts. And I ended up picking Dylan Radins for us while knowing in my head, and I believe I said it in the mock, that I saw him more as a guard in the NFL than a tackle. He seemed like a good kid and a hard worker and all that. He just didn't look like an NFL tackle to me. Sam Cosmi looks like an NFL tackle to me. He like the man is either 6'6" or 6'7", depending on where you see it, and he's already at 315. He'll be 325 or 330.
And he's a beast. He's an athletic beast.
He's athletic. I saw somewhere, I didn't write it down, the exact quote, but somebody called him an athletic freak.
Gotta love that terminology.
One of the analysts. And when you get a guy who's 6'6" or 6'7" and 325, and he's an athletic freak, and I'm sorry, the man's got a mean streak. I don't know if I missed it on the first couple of highlights here, but he'll bury you and put you in the ground. And he can run. He's got, apparently his arms and hands are very, very strong. He clearly has things to work on. It looks like he gets a little upright, and against powerful bull rushes, that's going to be a problem. But with NFL coaching and a little time to develop, it's hard to see this guy not being a starter at tackle, left or right, in the NFL. I think he's going to start on the left for us. John, you were talking about guys who played a lot of games. He's played a lot of games. He started 13 of 14 as a freshman, then took over at right tackle, then took over left tackle, started 21 straight games until he opted out 8 games into 2020. And my favorite thing about him, I hope you guys have seen it, is the video of him receiving the call from Rivera.
Are you serious? Are you
the man
serious?
Cried like he was a man child, and he could barely speak. So, you know, if you got that much heart and you want it that bad, and you're clearly happy about where you're going, keep your head on straight, put in the work, and you'll be starting at left tackle here for 12 years.
And you'll be beloved, because that kind of player, they fit in with this fan base. We kind of fall in love with guys like that.
Yep.
Not the underdog necessarily, but the non-flashy, bring your lunch pail to work. You blink and he's somehow been in the league for 11 seasons and been effective, and nobody outside of DC really knows his name, but he just comes to work.
Yeah, Samuels was kind of that guy, right? Chris was never on anybody's list of the top. Nobody talked about him, but we knew. Right. We knew.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was a lot of talk about the RAS, metric. I don't know if it's raw athletic score, but basically it's an athletic metric. How athletic are the players? And I think I don't have it in front of me, but I know we did very well, like as far as drafting athletes. And I believe I heard that he had the fastest 40 time of any O lineman. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I did hear that. And he's super good at pass protection. I think the only criticisms I've seen, which to me are minor criticisms, is that he can be inconsistent at times, and that his run blocking still needs some work. Like maybe he's not as explosive at run blocking as he is in the pass protection. And you also mentioned, Mark, that he may get blown up a little bit with like power rushers on the inside a little bit. He's not as strong with that. But I think all of that's going to come. I think he's going to be a really good one. That's my sense of it.
I also like the idea that there was one thing that I read, and he was speaking, and just a quote that he had where he said he doesn't really care if he's asked to play the left or right side, and having that versatility, I think, can come in handy this year. We know that Lucas played half decent last year. With Moses, health is always an issue, right? If we need the guy to swing to right tackle in a pinch, this seems like the kind of guy that would willingly do it and can probably be effective at doing it as well. So that versatility piece is really, really important moving forward for the future, but also in a pinch on a week-to-week basis, it could certainly help us.
And I don't think we should overlook, and I've said it on previous podcasts, I don't think we should overlook the fact that Moses is north of 30. And he's almost a $10 million cap hit next season. So if you get a guy like Cosme who can come in, he can play some consistent right tackle, and you find yourself in the draft next year being able to land a top of the line left tackle, you're talking about 2 young studs on their rookie deals, and freeing up $10 million is going to go a long way if you got to pay Allen, pay Payne. We just picked up his 5th-year option. You got to pay Young, Sweat, all of these guys coming. And that's another reason we'll talk about maybe a little bit later, but that's why another reason Landon Collins needs to be looking over his shoulder, because he's going to have to prove he's worth it on this team this year, because I don't think it's going on beyond this year in the same, the same breath.
There's some guys coming for him. Derek, do you mind? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know how into the Darisaw potential you were. And since we didn't take him when we could, what did you see in Darisaw? Make the case for Darisaw over even Cosme.
I just think Darisaw was your prototypical left tackle. I've literally heard people talking about him in the same breath as Trent Williams, that they were similar coming out. Now, Trent Williams was a freak, and he was picked second overall, right behind Okung, correct? Okung went to Seattle, and we took Trent Williams.
Yes.
So he might not have been that polished, but as a raw blocker, pass protector, Darisaw started, I want to say coming into the season, he was ranked middle of the pack as far as a run blocker. And by the end of the season, he was rated as one of the top. So he had a very balanced game, which is why I liked him. But then more and more, I guess my eyeballs didn't work correctly, because more and more I saw a lot of people rating him in the mid to late 20s, which was shocking to me, because Minnesota, I figured he was going to Minnesota at 13. They traded or 14. They traded back to 23 and still got him,
Still got him. Yep. It's good for them.
That was shocking to me. So I guess they saw something I didn't see. I just fell in love with Darisaw when I first started seeing him. But I will say, the one thing with Darisaw you don't see as much as some of the other guys is that mean streak. He finishes blocks, but he doesn't finish blocks with the intent of pain. You know what I'm saying? And that's something you do see with Cosme. You saw it with Slater. You saw it with some of the other guys. So maybe that was the difference,
I don't know if it was a factor or not, but I know there was some news that came out a couple days before the draft that he had some core body injuries.
Yeah, surgery. Yeah.
And we've had a lot of, I think that scares Washington more than maybe some other clubs, because we've taken these flyers on, not that he would be a flyer by any stretch, but we have taken flyers, gotten bargains on the players who, because they dropped in the draft due to injury. And I know, I think Arakpo had those same kind of chronic injuries to his core, and was never really the player.
Speaking of which, it came out that JOK had a heart condition, and that didn't. So that could be why he ended up in the 50s.
It's funny how these things work. I don't watch a whole ton of college football. I watch all Tech games as a Hokie, and I think I saw every game that Darisaw played. And until the end of this year, and he started getting talked about as a first round elite left tackle, I just never saw it. Mm-hmm. And that could be me. When I watched the games, I didn't pick him out as that kind of player.
Well, that means he was doing his job. If you don't know the left tackle's name, it means he's doing his job.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's fair. So I would not have been unhappy had they drafted him.
Right.
I think I'm happy the way it worked out, particularly because I think Cosme is going to be a solid player there. So sorry to sidetrack us.
You're good. So, Paul, I think I'm going to tee you up on our boy St. Juiced over here. How do you feel about that?
Well, it would be silly of me to say that I don't like the pick, considering the country he was born in.
You texted me during the draft and said nobody in our group better be talking smack about a Canadian.
Yeah, but no, as John mentioned earlier, it might have been a little early to get the guy, but I mean, we're talking about a guy that, 6'3", he's got an 80-inch wingspan. His skill set is clearly suitable playing outside. I think they really had to like him, and really had to like, aspects of his game in order to take him in that spot. But in regards to this pick, the one thing that I was thinking of is I couldn't help but think of the difference between the situation that he's going to be walking into compared to some of the other cornerbacks that we've brought in the past, in and around that third round area, that we had fairly high aspirations for, but just didn't pan out. And I'm thinking of guys like David Emerson and guys like Fabian Moreau, both third round picks as well. Emerson started 23 games in his first 2 years in Washington. He started 8 as a rookie. He lasted 2.5 seasons with the team. Same thing with Moreau, another third round pick. By his second season, he was starting 10 games for Washington. And by this point, he's gone as well. I think with St. Just, he's going to have a little bit of a better opportunity to survive long term because he's ultimately walking into a much better situation. There's depth ahead of him. He's not going to be required to play a huge role this year. And as a result, I don't think he's going to get overwhelmed out of the gate. Because quite frankly, we don't need him out of the gate. We got two pretty solid corners that can play in front of him. And I think it just gives them some time to marinate and grow and develop. And, in that regard, I'm okay with it because we're not going to be throwing him to the wolves.
Yeah, he's not the fastest guy, but one thing that jumps out at you when you look at highlight videos is he's got lateral quickness, not like straight line speed, which is probably why he was drafted where he was drafted. But he can move side to side really well, and I love the fact that he covered Rashad Bateman in practice every day. I think that's got to be that's a pretty tough assignment, and I think that's going to serve him well as he goes into the NFL.
My notes on this guy, I've got him at a 4.51 40. I don't see him as an outside corner. I do see him as a pretty strong slot option and a good like nickel package guy. I think the one thing that jumped out at me in all the reports I read and sort of like we had with our athletic freak Cosme, the comment that jumped out at me is he's a brute at the catch point. And I kept looking at the film, trying to think, what does that mean? When the ball arrives and when he arrives at a tackle, I always wondered what length meant. They're talking about he's a long player. When you watch this guy play and tackle, he's long. His arms, he's just got this. Nobody's going to run right next to the guy. He reaches out and he's like a spider and takes him in. I don't see him he doesn't look like a big hitter, but he is a very strong tackler and good hands. I was surprised that they took him there. I think he might have been on the board later, but taking him at this, what suggests to me is that they might see him as a bit of a project, but that he's got enough upside and might fit into their scheme to spend that third on. This is the kind of pick that in 2 years could look like a steal if he pans out and his skill set matches up and he stays healthy and all that. This could look like a steal because he's got the tools, but we won't know for a couple of years.
So on his wingspan, I just ran across this. He has the second longest arms of any cornerback in the draft, of the entire draft. So that's not your imagination. He really does.
Yeah, that's what
cover a lot of territory with.
Yeah, that's what length means, and that's a functional thing in the NFL.
I think I heard a report. Rivera talked to another coach who was interested in trading up for him had we not taken him where we took him. So for whatever reason, now coming from the coach, there's a lot of ways you can look at that. I like the pick, but it's kind of an embarrassment of riches almost. We're paying Jackson, we're paying Fuller. So I wonder what his role is going to be. You said you didn't see him on the outside, but the only way I look at it is that he ends up taking the outside and you can move Fuller around and that gives you that functional versatility. Now, if it's a 2 receiver set, if you've only got 2 corners on the field, obviously it's going to be Jackson and Fuller. You're not going to take Fuller off the field for St. Just. But if you've got a situation where you're playing against Green Bay and Devontae Adams can move into the slot, you can shift Juiced outside and you can put Fuller more on the man-to-man. The other thing I think this does is it follows the same suit we've been talking about. I wonder how much more press man we're going to see in our defense, because he does not look like a zone corner to me. He looks like a man corner to me, a physical man corner, or at least a hybrid, somebody who can press the line, push the receiver, and then drop into a short to intermediate zone. I'm not expecting him to turn and bail and play a cover 4 because he's going to have to run 30 yards and he's going to I don't know that he'll get blown by, but
yeah, I don't think he's that guy either.
So
it also makes you wonder, is this any kind of an indication of what they think of Jimmy Moreland? And I know Moreland's a fan favorite, Jimmy effing Moreland, but I don't know.
He's a coach's favorite.
It might not be any reflection on him. I just was surprised because you don't really expect a depth corner in the 3rd round. To me, you don't. That's a guy that if you need to plug him in there, you can. And So I don't
Yeah,
know.
a third round corner, you're bringing him in with the intention of contributing. You're not bringing him in with the intent of.
No, I hope I'm wrong and that they do see him as an outside corner and they can develop him into that role, because clearly that's where we need. It hasn't been that many years. Maybe the wound is still raw, that we were bringing in guys who had been slicing bologna during the week to start in our secondary
Oh, I know.
because of the injuries. So at this, I'm still okay with bringing in quality young depth, and keep the best guy and anyway, move on from there. And he's now my second favorite Canadian.
Well, I'm
Who's
going to
your
double
first?
down on my quote unquote letdown pick here.
Dude,
The first round I was let down about Darisaw. I will freely admit the third round I was very let down because Tommy Tremble was on the board the whole time.
Yep.
So that plays into my apprehension a little bit, because in my brain, my dream scenario, Tremble was on this team because I think he was probably a top 2 or 3 tight end in this draft. But we took a tight end later, so we can talk about him a little bit. But
So
I just wanted to
looked
throw
up
that
who was
out.
available, Derek, because I had
Huh?
that same. I actually looked up who was available at that pick because I had the same reaction you did. And just some names that jumped out at me were linebacker Chaz Surratt was there, Hunter Long and Tommy Tremble were both there. Quinn Meinertz, who I like, and Spencer Brown were sitting there. I thought we could have used another interior offensive lineman versus another wide receiver personally, but or a corner. But I think there was definitely players that you could question that pick. If you're going to question any of them, I think that was one of the ones that you might question a little bit.
So moving on to the pick that John literally dropped cuss words about when the draft was picked, and he started asking some boisterous questions. So John, I'm going to throw it to you and see your reaction to De'Ami Brown after it's settled down a little bit.
Well, he wasn't one of the guys I really looked at, and when I was getting tweaked at that pick, it wasn't because of Brown. It was really just because how many wide receivers do we need? I felt like we brought in Samuels and we brought in Humphreys, and we've got guys coming off IR that have promise. So I just felt like, gosh, really? It just felt like, I know we should be drafting best player available to a certain extent, but I was just surprised by it. But since then, after looking at him, he might be one of the guys we look back at in a couple of years and call him the steal of the draft or hidden gem. He's got second round talent, and he does have that impressive straight line speed. I mean, he can blow past guys. He had a few more drops at UNC than I think he should have had. So that's probably one area I think could stand some improvement on, is just his hands and his focus. But he's got a lot of potential to improve, and as a pass catcher and a route runner. And like I said, a lot of people thought he would be gone in the second. So I really can't criticize I think most people feel like we got really lucky to grab him where we did. My issue is, did we really need a wide receiver? And who's going to be the odd man out, which we don't need to talk about tonight, but somebody's going to be the odd man out, and probably somebody that's got potential.
There's going to be 5 somebodies that are the odd man out.
Well, that's true.
Funny, this kind of comes around to, I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot to add about him. I'm really happy about it. But the idea that we truly are taking what they consider BPA as far as how they fit into our scheme and what we want to do, that's still pretty refreshing to me. When you're bringing in a kid who runs like this guy does, to put opposite McLaren and Samuels out there, you put the 3 of them out there, you're putting a defense on their heels. Nobody can sit. You're not gonna be able to press this guy too easy. I am making it a point to trust Del Rio and Rivera and Turner and the personnel department, that these guys actually are doing their jobs, and they're not just grabbing BPA on someone's rating. I think they're targeting people that they can really fit and grabbing the best fits they can, regardless of position. And that's all I have to say about that.
I instant reaction was a little frustrated. I'm not going to lie. Again, it was kind of like in the moment I was frustrated, but looking at the draft back, looking back at things and trying to kind of look at them in a vacuum, a lot of these picks make sense. He was a steal. At this point, it's kind of like he just reached a point where they just could not let him keep falling. And because you don't expect De'Ami Brown to be there at this point, this late into the draft on the third round. I think he opens up the offense quite a bit in the fact that now Samuel is not your number 2 wide receiver. He is what he is meant to be. He's versatility. He's a weapon. You don't necessarily need to line him up opposite McLaurin and say, okay, go out here, learn a 30-play route tree, and, you know, take all the pressure off of McLaurin. Instead, you can put De'Ami Brown out there and you can move Samuel inside. You can put him in the backfield. You can run him on jet sweeps. You can do a lot more of those gadget type plays that truly do put a defense on their heels because you have a threat like Brown who's going to clear out your safety on the other side. If you look at his highlights, he gets separation, but even with 4.4 speed, a lot of the time he's contested catches, but he's really good at it. So it's kind of one of those deals. Maybe you can streamline his route running to create some more separation, but if the ball's near him, he's going to go get the ball and he's going to fight for it and he's going to play hard every down. I heard somebody on the radio talking a little more in depth about him. They said his drops, they're concentration drops. It's just like he gets lackadaisical, which is not the most impressive thing to hear, but it's better than hearing he has bad hands. You know, I'd rather him drop the ball because he loses focus than drop the ball because he's Rod Gardner. So 50-50. So to that point, maybe with some NFL experience, maybe with being in the locker room with guys like McLaurin, guys like Samuel, guys who have been in the league for a little while at the top of their game, he can see that and he can try to mimic that. And then he's got a guy like Fitzpatrick throwing the ball. He's going to want to push the ball downfield. So the more plays that you can get downfield, the more guys you can get downfield, the more opportunity he's going to have. And McLaurin, now there's not that he's making excuses, but now you're just opening up the offense for him because of the weapons. Gibson, Samuel, now Brown, Thomas, pick your poison. Where are you going to double? Okay, double McLaurin. There's a lot of other places we can go.
John Bates.
We'll get there.
So actually, that's who's next on the list here. So I'm going to
Paul, did you have something to say about Mr. Brown? Did I miss it?
No, I didn't say anything in regards to Brown. But I'll be honest with you. My very first reaction when I saw wide receiver was I kind of got that ill feeling in my stomach just because of all the past fails at the receiver position. I know we hit on McLaurin, but at the end of the day, I think I see some value in this pick because he pushes the bottom end of that receiving core. So your Cam Sims, your Kelvin Harmon, your Gandy Goldens, who knows, maybe this pick is a little bit of a wake up call for some of those guys to pick up their game as well. And maybe it has that trickle down effect and we end up being even stronger than maybe we already think we are at receiver.
Yeah. Two quick things, right? One, think of the position battles that we're looking at now. Let's just even at wide receiver, we're going to be cutting guys that can play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always been the case around here. The other thing I keep thinking is with all the speed that we've now got on the outside, how different the offense is going to look this year versus last year with Alex throwing everything underneath to the Mad Bomber in Fitzmagic throwing everything over the top. It's going to be a very different looking offense.
Well, I put that article up there, not to go on another tangent. I put the article up there about the air yards that we saw with Heineke versus what we saw with the other three guys. Yeah. And it was double and almost triple some of those guys. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And we're going to be going up against some good defenses this year. So it's going to be interesting. I hope fans don't get too down on Fitzpatrick too quickly because he's going to be facing some tough competition. The schedule comes out, a week from tonight, I think. So we'll see how early we play the teams like Buffalo and Seattle and some of those bigger in Tampa and see how we can get things going. Hopefully it's a little soft landing or a soft startup and we can try to get some momentum.
We're not going to be a team anyone's all that thrilled to see on their schedule anymore.
I agree with that. On to Mr. Bates. And Mark, you commented, so I'll let you run with it a little bit if you want to try.
Yeah. So I'll just, my notes that I wrote earlier today, because I hadn't really thought much about John Bates. My first reaction when I saw we took a tight end, particularly at this point in the draft, was, yeah, well, I guess we took a tight end because we needed a tight end, and I'm not crazy about need picks. But then the ratings that this guy was, most of what I saw was all based on his ability as a pass catcher. I don't think that's why we brought him here. I think we brought him here to block. And Rivera was interviewed and asked about what it is about this guy that he liked. And he said his blocking stood out and he was a polished blocker, which I think he steps in day one on the other side and starts sealing the edge for you and providing a little bit of solidity from that position that we really haven't had in a while. He also said that as a pass catcher, what they like about him is this, quote, tremendous catch radius. Apparently he plays big, and when the ball's near him, he catches it. Now, he did play out in Boise State, where I don't think they run the ball more than twice a year. He didn't have his catch, that's not what he was asked to do. He I think primarily helped in what run game there was and helped in pass pro. But the man looks to me like he can play, and he is 6'5", 250 now. If he can run, I don't have his 40 time, but it's not going to take much for him to be a useful tight end. We don't need a great tight end. This goes back to a pod we had earlier. I don't think he needs to be a great pass catching tight end, but if he's a solid blocker and enough of a threat where defenses need to keep an eye on him and either commit a safety or a linebacker, it's hard to see a bottom line there. I think he's going to get a chance to play early, as long as he can learn a playbook and concentrate, not get his ass kicked inside. We're going to find out pretty quickly if this man can play. I don't think it'll take even a full year. We'll know by the end of the year if he's going to be here.
So I don't see a 40 time. I'm kind of looking real quick, but what I did see, believe it or not, was that he was actually a multi-sport athlete, including track, and he ran 110-meter hurdles.
Yeah, I saw that too. I was going to mention that.
He was a long jumper, triple jumper, javelin thrower, and ran high hurdles.
So that's an athlete.
You have to be an athlete to do those things, man.
Yeah, yes. That's explosive legs, and that's strength. That's leg strength. So there's got to be speed there. I want to say I heard 4.7-ish 40, which is not elite speed. But as a tight end goes, I mean, that's all you really need from a guy. It might have even been a little faster, but I don't remember off the top of my head. One of the knocks I've seen on him is he plays kind of at one speed, but he's a freaking tight end. Like, I don't know what you're talking. You know what I'm saying?
A blocking tight end.
Right. So what speed do you go forward and take the ball and carry 4 defenders with you? If you do that, I don't care how fast you go. You just keep doing it. So,
Derek, the what is it? Draft Scout has him at a 4.84 40, a low 4.76. So he runs a 4.76, 4.78. He'll be okay within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. 15 yards.
Yeah, and if you can get him isolated against a linebacker, I think you're doing okay. Because Jabril Cox isn't going to be able to jump with him. Micah Parsons will be able to run with him, but he's as big or bigger than both of those guys. Jeremiah Owusu-Kiyomora might be able to run with him and try to cover him, but again, his size will outweigh it. And then he'll just block him down the field because he's got 35 pounds on him.
Yeah, in the NFL, you don't have to be an amazing athlete. I think of Jason Witten. That's the guy I like to think about when I think about non-athletic tight ends. Witten was just a guy, but he was a great football player. This guy doesn't have to run 4.5 and make leaping one-handed catches in the back of the end zone. He needs to get open, stay in the system. When the ball comes to him, catch it. I think he's got a chance.
I don't think they brought him in just to be a blocking. I mean, we talked in an earlier mock about, will we ever have a tight end that can block? But I don't think they would have invested in him at that point if they didn't feel like there was something there to work with, because the last thing you want to do is telegraph by bringing in a guy that can only do one thing what you're getting ready to do, because it's not 1980 and you're not going to say we're going to we're going to run Riggins into the line and we're going to tell you we're doing it and we're still going to do it. It's not that kind of a game anymore. You have to you have to be able to do a lot of things and keep the defense guessing. So I think they must think that he was just not utilized, appropriately at Boise State and that they can do something with him.
Well, to that point, I believe I heard on the radio today, someone was breaking down the draft a little bit, and they said that while he did not have an overwhelming number of completions, his catch percentage was 80 something percent.
Good hands.
So when he got targeted, he was catching the ball, 9 times out of 10, which is why defenses aren't going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to look at him and just say, well, now they're running it, because if you're going to cover him, you got to blanket him. You're going to have to, you're going to have to beat him. He's not just going to be, I hate to say it, Jeremy Sprinkle running down and the ball bounces off his face mask. Even though I did see someone say that the closest comp is Jeremy Sprinkle, which I hope is not true.
I did not hear it, but I did hear that Chris Cooley said that Bates was his favorite pick in the entire draft. I wish I had heard exactly what he said, but that kind of caught my attention because Cooley's not really one to throw praise around in an unwarranted fashion. But I think it's that damn blue field at Boise State. That's what got it. That's what messed him up. Otherwise, he'd have.
Somebody asked him in an interview if he was going to be able to catch the ball on green grass.
He said, I don't know, throw me one and I'll let you know. So what do we expect from a blocking tight end? I've always sort of wondered about that. I've never thought that means that they don't throw to him. I would think that this is a guy you want to sneak the ball to 3 to 5 times a game to keep defenses honest. Because I agree, you can't just be out there to block. I'd like to see 2 tight end sets. But when you've got a primary pass catching tight end like we have in Thomas, the other guy he just has to be a threat, but you do need to throw it to him.
I love him in the red zone because no one's going to be expecting the ball to come to him.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of teams do that. They'll throw it to the guy that isn't the best athlete, but that isn't going to have the top coverage guys on him.
I think sometimes we tend to forget that there's only going to be so many balls that can go around in this offense. We're undoubtedly improved in that area. And it was Todd McShay who mentioned that, in his opinion, Bates has the second best pair of hands in the entire draft at tight end outside of Kyle Pitts. So in regards to what you were saying, Mark, if we can have a guy that we can rely on, but also have a guy that can contribute 20 to 30 balls, 20 to 30 catches in the year, I think that would be an ideal complement for our offense.
Because at best,
Bingo.
if everything works correctly, or if everything works to the best scenario that we all have in our brain, he's the 6th target. You're talking McLaurin, Samuel, Gibson, McKissick, Logan Thomas. That's not talking about De'Ami Brown
or Humphreys.
So at some point, like he said, we're going to run out of balls, but that means that he can be on the field a lot without it keying anybody and nobody's going to really be paying attention to him. So if you can utilize him, he can be that guy that can bust off that 45-yard seam, down the seam touchdown because the safety's floating elsewhere or doing something like that. So I think I'm only going to do one more highlight package for Derek Forrest. We can kind of talk about the other guys a little bit.
You don't have a Cameron Cheeseman highlight package?
I don't, but I do want his jersey. I'm just going to tell you that much. So we can dig a little bit into him. I'll be honest with you guys. I no squat about this guy, other than he spells his first name a lot differently than I do. But other than that, I'm intrigued. I'm going to defer to you guys if you guys even know.
Well, I looked him up today because he was the guy that I knew the least about, and when he was drafted, I kind of went, "What?" I thought if we didn't take the top-rated safety, we might not draft a safety, but I know he was a special teams ace. He's always around the ball. He's pretty good against the pass and the run. He's a very good tackler. He's very fast. He had a really good junior season. I guess the starter, whose name evades me right now, but the starter went down with an injury, and he came in and surprised everyone and played, had a really great 2019 season. he was defensive captain in 2020. That caught my eye because that goes to kind of what Paul was talking about, that we're drafting character guys and leaders and guys that do the right thing. And he's a little small for a safety at 6 foot, 200 pounds. So he'll probably have to beef up a little bit, but I think he's another one that athletically, he's a pretty solid athlete. So that's what I know about him.
The man has 4.4 speed. It looks like the straight line speed is good. And I was watching the videos and some of the analysis I saw on him was that the didn't necessarily equate to game speed, where he seems to be strongest. And, I like these terms now. He's a strong run defender with an alpha vibe. And energetic on special teams. That's what I wanted to throw in there. I think they're looking at a guy who can contribute on teams. He doesn't seem to have ideal free safety size to me. He's 5'11", 6 foot, but the man can run. And if he's got an alpha vibe, get out there and mix it up. Let's see what he's got. He looks like Jeremy Reeves to me. He looks like another Reeves player.
I think this is. I think this also, in speaking of Jeremy Reeves, I think this pick, to a certain extent, is a big endorsement of Reeves and the development he had last year, and the way he was just able to work his way off the practice squad and onto the roster and contribute down the stretch. I think they feel really good about him. And in regards to Forrest, again, we're talking about a 5th round pick, but we're not talking about a guy that's going to be pressed into playing big time minutes for us early on in the season, right? There's a specific defined role for him, and that is to be able to contribute right out of the gate on special teams. And again, we're talking about the 5th round. I think that's about as much as you can ask a 5th round pick to do.
With the hope that you hit on one of these guys, right? And they turn into something special, which certainly the physical skills are there. And it's just a matter of right place, right time. And does he fit?
But I think it also goes back to what I mentioned about him, his best season being when he had to sub in unexpectedly for the starter. And he's got the speed, he's got NFL speed. So that's the good thing. If somebody were to go down and he has to jump in there, I don't think it would be a disaster.
In that highlight package, I saw some coverage skills. So you wonder if they're looking at him like, this guy can be that slot corner style, maybe long-term, that slot corner, not quite nickelbacker because he doesn't have the size to play along the line of scrimmage and blitz, but that guy that can be asked to cover the running back or the wide receiver or flex back to a safety position, or he can come down and be that emergency defensive back in the event that you have to read and adapt, because I've said it before, I'll say it again, matchups are everything. So if you can minimize a matchup, and if you can kind of negate the mismatch, then you're ahead of the game.
You think about the NFC East now, the other 3 teams are pretty loaded at receiver. So I'm okay with loading up with some speed and aggressiveness in our secondary. I think we're going to need it.
So the best pick in the draft we took in the 6th round. I think we actually traded up with Philly to get this pick, if I'm not mistaken. We traded a 5th in 2022 for a 6th and a 7th in 2021. And with our 6th pick, we took Cameron Cheeseman, the long snapper out of Michigan.
We needed one and we got one. That's my comment.
I love the pick. It's an interesting way to approach the draft, going with a long snapper or going with a special teams player at this point. But you're going to have people that obviously say we wasted a pick at this point. But here's the honest truth. I personally still have a bad taste in my mouth from Dan Turk in that divisional playoff game against Tampa Bay.
I can't believe you said that.
I'm sorry. Ultimately, it takes 53 people to win a game. I mean, 9 times out of 10, when your special teams are in the highlight reel, they're usually in the highlight reel for the wrong reasons, and you're losing the game. So in my opinion, I think that he can bring a level of stability to the team, to the position, and there's nothing wrong with picking him at that point, considering how big of a need we had there. And the other thing is too, that I was thinking of, Hopkins didn't have a great year last year, kicking the football for us. And I know there were a few things that I read that were possibly suggesting that they were attributing it to Nick Sundberg's snaps, and his snaps were off that last year. So I wonder if it has a little bit of a trickle down effect, and if it maybe helps Hopkins improve his game this year as a kicker as well. Who knows?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Sundberg was injured, and it was not widely broadcast.
Right.
So
he sucked it up.
there was some speculation that he played through a pretty substantial injury for a long snapper, because was it his AC joint or something in his shoulder? If I'm not mistaken.
I forget.
And if I'm also not mistaken, that people are speculating that is what caused us to let him go. Because it was the kind of injury that you just don't recover from at the age of 33. So I was sad to see Sundberg go. Sundberg's just been kind of a quiet, unknown corner of this team for a long time. He was the longest tenured player, if I'm not mistaken. So letting him go, there was definitely good reason for it. But then to turn around at the end of the day, if you use a 6th-round pick and you get somebody who starts for your team for the next 10 years, it's a win. I don't care where they play. Long snapper, punter, kicker, it doesn't matter. If it hits, it hits. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Because most 6th-round picks end up on a practice squad or gone. So I don't know enough about him to be confident in him, but if they believe him enough and it works out, then it's a home run of a pick.
I actually made some notes about Cameron. I have to share them with you. So to echo something Paul said, the best thing about the pick to me, my first reaction is that it indicates to me this team takes the details seriously. We've had a long snapper for a long time. We lose him. What did we do? We went out and made strong efforts to pick up a guy for a very specific role. I'm okay with using a 6th rounder on that. Plus we can have all kinds of fun with his name for a very long time. This isn't mine, but one of them was like, so was this a Gouda pick? So the man is 6'4", pushing 240.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a little guy. This is a man with some heft on him. He runs just a little. He lost like a 5 flat 40, which to me is okay because he's not supposed to be the lead guy down anyway. He's trailing, right? He's the center fielder to catch the one who gets away. The analyses I did see, and this is a red flag for a long snapper, was that he's not all that consistent with his long snaps, particularly back to the punter, and tends to wobble them and sail one once in a while. That would be a bad thing. Bottom line to me, he's a specialist. He'll get 1 or 2 seasons to show, he costs us a game or 2 with a bad snap. He'll be gone. So we'll know at the end of probably by the end of the first year, if we've got an NFL caliber snapper. If we do, he's here forever. If not, we have to cut the cheese.
By the way, the Sundberg injury was a torn tricep tendon. So you wonder if his ability to snap for the long term with that kind of an injury was just too much to overcome. I'm not even going to laugh, John.
I know it's all right. It was
all
worth
right. So to wrap things up, I figure we can probably just hit the 7th round because we probably don't have a ton to say about these guys. Pick 240 overall. We took William Bradley King, defensive end out of Baylor. 246, we took Shaka Toney, the defensive end out of Penn State. And then pick 258, we took Dax Milne, the wide receiver out of BYU.
So I was surprised that they took Bradley King before Toney. I think both of those guys look more like outside linebackers than edge rushers. And I don't know. I think there's more. If you look at Toney's college stats, he looks great at times. He looks inconsistent at times, but he had a really good pro day according to what I've read about. And He did improve his sack numbers every year that he played. So Tony looked like the guy that was more had more potential to me than Bradley King, but what do I know? Both of them were projected to go in the 6th round, so they were, we got them at a bargain, I guess. I'm not sure what we have in either one of them, to be honest, though. Tony also played at Penn State, so he's playing big time, opponents. So I think that has to come into play as well.
I found it interesting. I was reading something that Martin Mayhew was mentioning, and he was saying that for Bradley King and Tony specifically, that they were looking for these guys to potentially come in and have a specific defined role and be able to possibly contribute. So, I mean, to be able to contribute as a 7th rounder, I think that, they must feel pretty good about these guys and their chances of possibly, who knows, sticking on the roster.
I kind of, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
No, man, you go.
I want to say that I heard Tony actually play. Not only does he play special teams, but he almost gets enjoyment out of it. So you wonder if that's kind of part of it. And one guy that nobody's talked about yet is Milne. This is another one that was kind of a head scratcher, but then again, he's a 258th pick. If he works out, then it's a home run. If he doesn't work, then that's like finding an extra quarter in your couch cushion. It's not really, you're not really losing that much with that pick. Milne caught a lot of passes. If I'm not mistaken, he had like 1,100 yards receiving, and he was catching the ball from our boy Zach Wilson, who ended up in the Jets.
Yeah, he had almost 1,200 yards receiving, 6 games of 100+ yards in 2020 in a shortened season. So he definitely can play. I kind of got a little bit of a Trey Quinn vibe from him. Yeah. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I mean, he can play, just whether or not his athleticism is going to translate to the NFL is going to. I also wanted to mention that he was a Bullsworth Trophy finalist. Anyone who can tell me what that is, I'll give you a cookie. That is the national award for the best player who started as a walk-on. So he
there you go,
runner-up for the Burlsworth Trophy, but he also did some punt returning.
Yep.
So what were you going to say, Mark?
Well, he caught 70 from Wilson last year, which is clearly how he got on the radar, right? I know we scouted Wilson, we scouted everybody, and this guy kept showing up, catching the ball. I see a guy at the college level who is very competitive when the ball gets there. He's got good hands and good ball skills. I just don't see the athleticism I don't think he's going to make it. I think it'd be a nice story if he did, but the man's 6'1", close to 200, runs a 4.57. He might be a practice squatter, but I don't see it getting much beyond that. I don't see him helping on teams. On the 2 DEs that we took on Bradley King and Tony, my impression was that those are both like we drafted the same guy as depth and rotation pass rushers. I think we drafted guys that we are going to try to get in there 10 snaps a game to spell Chase and Montez in games when we've got a lead and we're trying to pressure the passer. I think if either one makes the team and can get on the field in packages like that, that would be a win. Bradley King, what jumped out, what I did notice about him, he's the competitive attitude and maturity. He was a big fish in a small pond at Arkansas State for 3 years, then transferred to Baylor for his graduate season and excelled in the SEC. That says something to me about who he is and what he wants. He's not a quick twitch or explosive guy, but he pursues and he plays hard. Seems like a strong guy. He is 6'3", 250. Not going to be a starter, but he could be a situational sub. Tony looks to me more like the outside linebacker stand-up DE that John was talking about. Very quick first step and good first move, but not particularly strong. I don't see him defending the run particularly, but I think he's also a situational pass rusher. I think that's what both of those guys were slotted to be.
So we would be remiss, guys, if we didn't spend at least 2 minutes on Jarrett Patterson, man.
I
Patterson.
literally was pulling his stats up right there because I was going to
This
say, we're
guy
not getting
is-
off of this call.
This guy is an exciting guy. I can't believe he didn't get drafted. I know why he didn't get drafted. The whole world knows why he didn't get drafted. He is 5'6". And when they say 5'6.5", he's barely 5'6", 195 pounds. But I'd just throw a couple stats at you. 2020 averaged 178.7 yards per game over 6 games. He rushed for 409 yards and tied an NCAA record for rushing touchdowns with 8 rushing touchdowns against Kent State.
Yeah.
And then he followed that up with 301 more yards against Bowling Green, which I believe is a national record. And this guy is intriguing because how the hell you tackle a 5'6" bowling ball rushing down the field at you? I don't know how you do that. Apparently it's not easy to do.
There have been guys like that in the NFL, right? Remember Dave Meggett wasn't a particularly big guy, but he was strong. This guy's a lot faster than Meggett was. I cannot wait to see the preseason games. Maybe the only time we see him for a while. I can't wait for the show. I really can't.
Barry
wow.
Sanders tweeted at him and said, "Good luck. I'm rooting for the little guys."
Yeah. The comp that I've seen to him is Darren Sproles.
Yep.
And I wonder if that kind of a weapon in this offense, oh my goodness. I don't
Apparently,
think
can he catch out of the backfield? I think I may have read that that's not been a strong point for him.
I don't
so.
think they had him do a lot of it, is what I
They
read.
didn't because he was running for 19,000 yards. In 2018, he had 7 receptions for 62 yards. In 2019, he had 13 receptions for 209 yards. So he averaged 16.1 yards per catch.
Scott Turner is up late drawing some shit in the ground, man, in
But
the dirt. He's calling up some plays to get this kid the ball in the open field.
But to elaborate, in 13 games in 2019, he had 312 carries for 1,800 yards. When are you going to throw him the ball? Because you know what I'm saying? So I don't. He had 325 snaps in that season for 2,008 scrimmage yards and 20 touchdowns in one season. Like that's getting close to the Barry Sanders, Oklahoma State. Like, I'm not saying he's Barry Sanders, but I'm saying that's statistically. So yeah, I knew we're gonna have to talk about him at least for a minute.
He might have a better chance of making the roster than the guys we grabbed in the 7th round, of any of them, in my opinion.
I think he makes. I don't think they cut him. I think he at least makes the practice squad. I think it's intriguing enough with that kind of ability. The one I did watch the YouTube package of that 8 touchdown game. And what I noticed, other than the fact that he was running free the whole game, was when he hits the line, he's moving. Very decisive first cut, and he is just gone. And he had enough top end speed to finish. That's a tough combination. In the NFL, man, you got 320-pound Samuel Cosme leading you down the field. You just get on his hip until you see the opening and you go. I can't wait to watch him play.
How many running backs did we carry last year on our roster?
4.
Yeah.
It was 4. Okay, so we're talking. We have Gibson, we have McKissick. Is Barber a lock?
I don't think Barber's a lock. I think Lamar Miller's a lock as long as he's ready physically.
Okay, see, and that's the other guy I was going to bring up as well, Miller. I don't know. Does this guy potentially have the ability to unseat one of those 2 guys? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he can make the roster for carrying 4 running backs.
He could.
I think he can knock Miller off.
Do we know if he
Miller
can return
has
punts?
only played 1 game in the last 2 seasons, so
Yep.
he's got an uphill battle. He was an emergency signing last season, so I think.
What'd you say, Mark?
No, I'm sorry. I wonder if he can return punts. That might be his golden ticket if he can.
It could be. I think he can unseat Lamar Miller. Barber has his role. This guy's not going to be able to do what Barber does. I don't think. Granted, 5'7", 195, he might be able to. You called him a bowling ball. I'm gonna call him more of a more of a cue ball running its way through a set of bowling pins. You know what I'm saying? Like but if you look at his base, he's squat, man. So you wonder if he could be a short yardage guy, if he could be that kind of guy that he proves his ability to just go in and get you 3 yards and and be that value and make it so, but he could get you that 3 yards, stay on his feet, and then go for another 60, where I don't think Barber can do that.
There aren't many defenders who are going to leverage this guy and get under him, right? He's going to find the crack and burrow and find those yards for you.
That's what someone said, is he'll always be the low man simply because of his height.
Bingo.
He's going to come into the NFL with the biggest chip on his shoulder that you've ever seen, because and you know he's been fighting that his whole adult life as an athlete. Yep. And I even read some comments about that, about how he just takes that as inner motivation and outworks everybody. But I mean, it just shows you how much measurables have skewed the drafting process, because the guy is a ball player. All you have to do is look at his film and look at his stats. And the fact that he didn't get drafted by anybody I don't care how tall you are or how tall you aren't. That to me just seems wrong based on what he did at college.
Oh, and he's a local kid who's just excited as hell that he's playing for the Washington football team.
He went to high school with Chase Young, right?
He was in Glen Burnie, I thought I read.
Yeah, he went to high school with Chase Young. Chase Young was like hooting and hollering. So Mark,
that was Pilati or something like that in Maryland.
Here's a highlight to show you his ability as a pass catcher, real quick. And then once he gets in space, it's just kind of good luck from there.
Yeah, he's a nightmare in space.
So,
like kind of trying to catch Tyreek, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he's got that speed, but yeah, trying to get a hold of that guy and trying to get him to the ground it's an event.
So I know we didn't talk about doing this, but why don't I have one based on my criteria, what grade I would give the 2021 draft. Going back to what I said at the very beginning, why I liked this draft is it was professional. It not only addressed needs, but managed to do it without reaching, and took BPA when BPA was indicated. I don't like to give super high grades. I'm calling this a B+. And I think it's a solid B+, and I think it has a chance 2 years down the road to go up to a solid A if a couple of these guys pan out.
Yeah, that's what I had in my head as a B+.
I was going to say solid B, very solid B. And I only say B because, again, like I said, my bias of what was left on the board, but they could easily prove me wrong in the next 3 years. Darisaw could come into Minnesota and not be what we thought he would be. Trumbull might show up and not be much more than a blocking tight end. And then we'll look back on this draft and be like, well, those guys are a lot smarter than us, which is probably why they make a hell of a lot more money doing what they're doing than we do.
Well, and those guys might blow up, but the guys we took might fit in well here too, and help this team jump up to the next level.
And I'm an advocate that I don't care where a guy gets drafted. If he's a contributor, it's a hit. People talked about Brandon Sheriff, and they were critical that you don't draft a guard at number 5, and you drafted him for tackle. But my response is, if I know I'm drafting an All-Pro or a Pro Bowler, consistent Pro Bowler, I take him at 5 any day of the week. I don't care what position he's at, outside of maybe a punter.
I'm with you on that. Or a long snapper.
You're right. And we could look back, and these guys could be good and could stand out, and Juiced could be our cornerback of the future because Fuller hits his point where he moves on or something. We don't know the plan long term. Who knows? But,
I like that we drafted athletic guys, most of whom had a wealth of college experience, so we kind of know what we're getting, and we did not reach for players with injury histories. I think all those 3 things are things that we've maybe not done so much in the past, and I like that about this draft. Not necessarily sexy at every pick, but solid.
But effective.
And no knuckleheads, right? What Paul was saying at the beginning, these are all guys that everybody seems to think are character guys with good work ethics, then they fit right into the mold that we're building here.
All right, Paul, you get to close us out here, man.
Yep.
No, I don't think I can add anything else that you guys haven't already said.
What's your
No,
grade?
I would give it a solid B plus as well. The talent and the skill set is there on a lot of these players, but as I said before, character and drive are oftentimes the difference between winning and losing. And we're bringing in the right kind of people. We're bringing in people that will run through a wall for Ron Rivera. And I think at the end of the day, that goes a long way towards becoming a champion, which we all want to be.
Hoorah.
Sounds good.
Amen.
It's been fun, boys, and we'll wrap it up there.
All right, brothers, rock and roll.
Have a good night,
Yes,
guys.
sir.